what you probably will want to do is, if you're losing it, just follow along. But it is recording now, and I'll turn off these lights here.
And I'll look for here. Yeah, okay.
I'll take some kitchen lights. Oh, okay. I'm coming. I know, I'm coming. Okay. No, don't bother. Okay. Hold on. When Mrs. Flash asked me to speak, I thought, for goodness sake, I mean, I talk often enough. For 43 years, you listened to me, and I don't think you really wanted to hear me. So I decided the only thing I could do is I would take some time and go into my slides that I have, thousands of them, and find something of the history of Christ Lutheran Congregation. This was a very wonderful day in the life of our church, a time when we came up to the hill for the first time as a congregation, and the process began of hallowing the ground on which the new church was going to be built. The crowd at that time wasn't that large. It was on a Sunday in August, and of course in August a lot of people are on vacations. But nevertheless, there was a great deal of enthusiasm among the people who went up to the hill on that day. We had drawn a cross on the ground, and of course that's the white stuff. And then I'm there, I believe, with a shovel to dig the first bit of dirt on top of the hill. Actually, a lot of work had already been done in cutting down the hill. Because we had to meet federal regulations, or so they told us, because there was a flight plan up across the Weber farm, and we were too close, and we had to be very careful about how high the church was going to be. Consequently, a lot of dirt had already been removed at that time. It was sort of a joke, as I'll tell you why later on. There were a lot of kids there on that day. They were also wondering what was happening. The thing that struck me about that picture as I look at it today is the difference between children, how they are dressed back some 50 years ago compared to today. What boy would come to church with a suit coat, a white shirt, and a tie? That's something you don't see today very often. Still another scene from that. I believe there's a man standing there with a blue suit. That is Lawrence Monfort Jr., one out of the architectural firm that designed our building. And these are members of the church council and also of the building committee. They prepared to do their work also of digging into the ground, getting ready for the great event that was going to take place. And here they all are digging. Imagine that's the first time many of them had actually used a shovel. And there again, people are getting ready. You know, I was going to show these slides in perfect order, but they tipped over and I put them back in at random, so you'll have to follow along with that. And there we have the little children. They also came in on the act with their little shovels, digging away at that which was going to be their church. And of course, many of them today are adult members of Christ Lutheran. This is a scene from the day of the dedication of the church. Some of the flowers that were there, there are still many more came in after this was taken. You got to have to remember, on the day of dedication, we did not have a pew in church. Supposedly, the truck that was bringing them from North Carolina had tipped over, and some of the benches had been destroyed, and so they couldn't be here. The actual reason was they hadn't started manufacturing them. And that's the train that came into Marshfield, and everyone wondered, what in all the world is in those flat cars? Those, of course, are part of the beams that we had in the church. They were produced out in California, and were transported that way to the city of Marshfield. It's really an unusual thing. They could have been manufactured in Kansas City, but somehow the man in charge of that decided to do it differently. Well, that's the way it looked upside down. If you want to turn your head a little bit, you can see it in that way. There we have people up on the roof, and what trouble that roof caused. Today, I hope it's fixed. The trouble with that whole thing was this. The architect had prescribed for the entire roof area of the church and of the fellowship hall a copper roof. It would have cost $25,000 more when we built it. But there were those in the congregation, especially a group of men, who said, we've got asphalt shingles on our house, they're perfectly good, we'll save all that money, and we'll have a church that's a little bit cheaper. You know about the church, about building the cost. When we started planning, I talked to Mark Hansen of the Citizens National Bank and asked him, how much money can Christ Lutheran borrow? He said, well, I would estimate in the range of $500,000. I said, well, we wouldn't use that much, but very happy to have that. Then Central State Bank heard about what we were doing. Two members of our congregation were directors of that bank, and they said, we want in on the act. And so they met with the directors of Citizens National Bank, and they told them Christ Lutheran will never be able to afford that kind of money. They couldn't pay $28,000 when they built the first church. What makes you think they could ever stomach a loan like that? We insist that no more than $325,000 be spent on the church. And so, well, citizens finally agreed. And that, after all, kept us from doing a lot of things that should have been done. The copper roof was guaranteed by the architect. Any leak, he would pay for the repair of it. But if you put on asphalt, he said, I divorce myself from that right now because it won't last. And so we put it up, and we had trouble right after that. You know, on the day of dedication, part of the roof came off. There was a strong wind, and the tiles just flew all over the neighborhood. That entire roof was replaced in spring by local roofing out of Eau Claire, and they said this will last. The following spring, they came back once more and put on another roof. We threatened them with a suit, and finally they agreed to put it on, and they were supposed to tack down every single shingle. Well, they did more or less do that, but they spattered that asphalt binding all over the roof, which was a bad situation. That's simply part of a building that was going up. That takes us to the day of dedication, when the women are in the kitchen and they are already preparing for the people that were going to come. Again, on the day of dedication, and there you see the roof. You know, that was the thing that caused more comment in the community than anything else. I'll have another picture of that a little bit later on. That, after all, was Schwery's hangar, the biggest hayloft in Wood County, and so on and on. This is a little out of whack, but this was a Christmas parade that we had. I think Marcia still has one. On the coldest night in the year, there is one of the exhibitions, not of our church. There, the manger scene that we had in front of the church. People came for miles. This was the first thing that people had ever seen in the city of Marshfield of this nature. So it was a very popular thing. There you can see some of the people who come to watch and see what it's all about. The children would crawl into that crib. They want to see the baby Jesus. There you see the rafters. It's an unbelievable sight. But it was an indication of just exactly what was going to happen in the future. That smallest arch that you see there were those in the congregation who insisted the building was too big. We're going to cut that out, shorten the building. That's one where I simply insisted that they had to go ahead with it. I wasn't very popular because of it, I can tell you that. That's when the bell tower was built. Sometime I would like to ask you, how many bells do you people hear on Sunday morning? 1? 2?
3.
Or 3?
Don't they all ring?
Anyone want to guess?
3.
You hear 2. The third bell isn't ringing.
Oh.
There's another scene in the winter. This was the time when there was a labor strike. in the month of January. The entire project was closed down because the union workers would not work unless there was a pay raise. And the builders, of course, in winter decided, well, we'll wait it out. So for a month, nothing was done. Then for the day of dedication, that's as, oh, you can't see it. I don't know if this is this thing on full bright. That's the scene at Christmas. There we are in the old church. At Christmas time with the two trees, with the altar, it was a very beautiful kind of a thing. That was before pews were installed in the church. There was that Sunday, some of you may remember, at the end of September, when we were allowed after the service to come up to the hill to see the building. Many people had not even watched the process of building, had never even seen what the inside looked like. And when they walked into it and saw it, they certainly were surprised and glad and happy that something had taken place. As you look at those windows, just before this you saw those huge beams. Actually, those beams were 18 inches, each one of them, higher than they were supposed to be. Consequently, the glassmaker had to revise his plans to extend all of these sections to make them larger, especially the one way on top, in order to fit the construction that had taken place. They weren't very happy about it. The tree at Christmas, there were only about the men who would go wake at the top. One was Ron Onasorga, another was Dave Meyer, president of the congregation. Dave Huber, every once in a while, would go wake at the top. There were a lot of people, after church on Christmas or during those weeks when it was up there, came with their entire family and had pictures taken. There you see, there are three of them actually, of the angels who are announcing Christmas. Very beautiful thing. This is the tree in the old basement in the old church. You'll notice the carpet, the floor, the black and red tile. They had a lot of fun down there. It was a nice place to meet. That was also in the week before dedication. All the trucks and everything had been removed, and I took a picture of finally it was done. This is a picture of an old couple in our congregation, Rose and Otto Goldgren. Any of you remember them? Their 75th wedding anniversary. Unbelievable, isn't it? And that huge cake. And that one there, blocked off a little bit, sitting next to Otto is my wife. There they are with the cake. It was a wonderful couple. One thing we did every year, we had a big Christmas party at the beginning of the Advent season. Carl Wenzel was a member of the congregation. He would have the turkeys and also the ham, and they would all be roasted at the Adler Bakery, which was next to his butcher shop downtown. The men of the congregation would come. The leader was Bill Hollowitz, Elmer Thuss, Lawrence Krieger, Alex Caves, and there were some others. They would come and they would set up the table and they'd do a beautiful job. You'll see more of that a little bit later. There at the table, the men really outdid themselves, I can tell you that. The meal was excellent. We'd have an excellent program. We'd have about 75 to 120 people who attended that kind of a meal. Of course, they had to pay the price. The price per person was $1.50 for a beautiful meal. After a meal like that, the women congregated in the kitchen. They were going to do the cleaning up. And they had a lot of fun at that. Sometimes it got a little bit hilarious. There again is the old church and the altar at Christmas time. And there are some women, they're sitting there. You can see we were down in the basement. The choir. Again, the scene of people eating at that kind of a meal. There are women in the church basement. I don't know, it must have been a ladies' aid meeting. this was the building committee in 1949. The man in the center is a man by the name of Irv Heil. There's Henry Knorr was there, Al Schrady. So I don't know, I can't see all the other men from here. There it's Christmas time, they're packing candy bags in the basement. You know, it's an old German custom, die Weihnachtstüte. I imagine a lot of kids get a big buzz out of that even to this very day. Parents don't have to buy quite as much candy. This is a group of men who met regularly once a month for Bible study. That man in the front row, the second one, is a man by the name of Adolf Pankow. And Adolf Pankow was the editor of the German newspaper in the city of Marshfield, which finally became the Marshfield News Herald. He also owned that press. Again, at Christmas time in the old church, it was really beautiful.
Oh.
The photography, of course, belongs to yours truly. And that was our first cat, Sir Purr. A member of the confirmation class, Lynn Llewellyn, promised she was going to give me something after confirmation. And she said, it's a cat. My wife was present, and she said, you want to go along and pick it out? And I told her, cats is cats. And then we got this beautiful cat.
She's pretty.
You know, it was almost unbelievable. There's another one later on. At night, Elsa would be in the living room. I'd be up here at church at a meeting. The cat would be lying in front of her. And all of a sudden, the cat would get up and walk to the back door. It made little difference whether it was 8 o'clock or I came home at 10. The cat knew that I was coming home. A beautiful cat. Again, the choir. That was a Christmas tree. It's still there, I believe, to this day in front of the church. It was a beautiful tree.
Oh.
That's one of our favorites, a little squirrel that we still have some of these that come and eat their nuts. This was Easter morning in our church.
Ooh.
There's a flower that I took, and I can't see very much of it. And another one. There is a choir rehearsal in the old church. Ilsa's at the organ. The women are doing the rehearsing. It was fun. The biggest choir we had in those days was Jerry Schrader. First of all, it was the one who really started the madrigals at senior high. Another man was given credit for that, but it was Jerry Schrader who actually started it. At that time, he was teaching at the later he was teaching at the university. And during his reign, then, we had a tremendous choir here at the church. For one Lenten service, we actually presented the Easter story, or the Lenten story, in music. And Jack Bickrick was the narrator. And he had a very good voice, and he was singing, and he came to the words of institution. You know, our Lord Jesus Christ, the night he was betrayed, took bread, broke it, gave it to his disciples, and they ate. Get to the second part. And he took the cup and broke it. That's a church in the eastern part of the state. I preached there, and I was asked to accept the call to the congregation, and I declined. This is a church in Minnesota. My brother was pastor there at St. Paul's in Arlington, Minnesota, right out on the prairie. The congregation had an old building. And finally decided to build a new church, and they really went all out. Most of the members were farmers, the greatest percentage, I would say 90% of them. And they only wanted one service on a Sunday. They wanted the whole family to come together, not some coming early and some coming late. So they built a large church. It's much larger than what you think this is. They, by the way, have a copper roof. It exists to this day, and they've never had a dollar spent on it. This is my father's church that he served for quite a number of years in Mount Herman and Dodge County. That building was erected in 1864. The walls on that building are solid limestone. Each wall, every wall is 3 feet thick. It's a beautiful church. It's kept up to this day. And there you see part of the family. That's Ilsa, and the little David, and little Susan, in the old parsonage. You know, that's something that was really funny. We were called 4 times from the city of Milwaukee. And when I think back to it, it's something like the words of Christ when he tells his disciples, you know, you people will go to the ends of the earth to find a convert, but you won't do anything at home. We came to Marshfield. Sad to say, nothing had been done in the parsonage. It hadn't been cleaned. Nothing had been washed. The basement was filled with junk. And oh boy, what a mess that was. You know, that house is attached right to the church. Consequently, our house really was a public place. There were times, you know, when Ilse and I would be in another room and suddenly we'd hear talk in the kitchen. The people came up from the basement, and they knew we'd come eventually, so they sat down at the table and they would talk. And if we didn't come, well, they went back to the basement. And that happened day and night. It didn't make any difference. We finally got a lock put on, so we didn't have so much of that stuff. It was really, you'd tear your heart out at times. But our children didn't suffer. They grew up. There's little David. He isn't that little anymore. Loves to shovel snow and do everything that little kid could do. That's our daughter Susan, as a little child.
Oh.
That would be Ilsa on the iron right, ironing shirts. And Sir Kerr would be in the basket. She'd take out one, crawl back in the basket until the last one shirt was ironed, and then he'd get up and walk away. Quite a cat. We don't have snowfalls like that anymore. Shoveling snow, and oh, by the way, just on the side there, you got to see it was I who was shoveling snow. This was the second cat, Albert, a wonderful cat. One of these gray cats, the most appealing kind of an animal you could imagine. Those are flowers. That takes me back to my home, and all those flowers, that row of flowers extended at least for another 50 feet. My father and my sister, Charlotte, would plant that every spring. And we say, who's going to take care of that? My father would look at my brother John and me and say, you are. He was always afraid we didn't have anything to do, so he developed all kinds of work for us. But we became experts in escaping. Oh, there's some flowers I took. That's Susan going up the steps. That was in the old parsonage. We had so many people, you know, in Sunday school, we had to do something. And so they decided, well, what we'll do is we'll take the parsonage and use some of the rooms. There were 4 rooms downstairs that could be used and 2 upstairs. And so we set up the tables and Sunday school material and so forth and so on. And it came the first Sunday when the children, there was 6 classes, came up here into the house, and some of their parents came along. And when they saw that stairs, they wouldn't allow their kids to go up. They said you could fall down. You know, Pastor Dornfeld's 5 children never fell down. Pastor Bradtke's 2 children never fell down. Boy, oh boy, they wouldn't allow them to, unless they had classes upstairs. And that, of course, helped us finally get to this choice of making a building. That's again is my father's church. We had a balcony. It was a strange congregation. For years, my father could only preach German, and the English that he had learned and that he preached every Sunday sort of went by the wayside. Until the last Sunday when he preached there was a confirmation day, and he had engaged a guest speaker, but he couldn't come. And people thought, well, how can those children be confirmed? No one could speak English. So my father conducted the service in English and also the sermon. And they asked him, when did that miracle take place? You can't talk English. He said, you bet I can. That's part of that church at Christmas time, beautifully decorated even to this day. They have a florist who belongs to the congregation, and he really goes all out to decorate that church for Christmas time. This is in my brother's church in Arlington, Minnesota. They built this church. You can't see the size of this. This is the chancel area. Many of you remember the old church at Hewitt? You could take the entire church, that little church, and place it into that part of the sanctuary. And have room on both sides to set up a row of pews. It was huge. The church was built, the main floor seated 250. The chancel seated 200, the choir loft seated another, seated 250, so 1,000 people could attend. For quite a while after the congregation had moved into the new building, Sunday attendance always averaged between 900 and 1,000 people. It only had stayed that way. There is that church, that little thing jutting out, is the office section. There are officers for 3 pastors, room for the altar guild, 2 rooms for secretaries. In other words, they had everything that you could want. There you see part of the row of pews. Now there were 4 rows of pews like that. This was taken about 3/4 of the way down, so you can get an idea of something of the size of that church. It was a huge thing. I preached it. It was very difficult. The inside walls, well, everything was brick, and there was a terrible echo in the church. You had to slow way down so that people could hear something, and of course I never slowed down. This was the first student of our congregation who began to prepare for the ministry, and that is Gordon Plain. And that is taken at Northwestern College or prep school in Watertown. He took his first 4 years there. This is something entirely different. It's a graduation. It's David leading his class at the University of Wisconsin at Whitewater. He graduated at the top of his class. Since I'm coming to the end, I mean, you won't hear this very often. He took 3 majors. One was in math, one was in business, one was in English. For 4 years, he graduated with a 4+. At the graduation ceremony, the provost of the university, in his introductory remarks, made the statement that this is the first time in many years that we've had any student graduate with 3 majors and have a 4-point average. Are the parents in the audience, thousands of people there, will they please stand up? So we stood up and people looked at us, what kind of a freak are they? There is the chancel area back in my brother's church. Now artists all over the country were vying for the opportunity to do the glasswork in that building. The one that they wanted to use was from Boston, Massachusetts. It was a woman who had begun to do the design work, but during his ministry they did not complete it. That is very dim, you can't see it, but if you look down into the lower corner,
Dog. Cat.
there you see
Dog.
our dog.
Yeah.
We called him Spotty. That's the first thing we purchased when we were married. This, of course, came from Watertown. Next to her parents' house was a couple, and they had a young pup. They had him penned up. The man always talked about going hunting, and the dog grew up. And one day in 1943, he took the dog hunting. The dog had never been out in the field. He roamed all over the place. Brought him back, and he talked to her parents, and he said, you know, I'm going to shoot that thing. He's no good hunter. We heard about it, and we asked Ilse's parents, will you take care of that dog? We couldn't take him to Milwaukee because we were living in an apartment. And they said yes. what could they say to their daughter? What they asked? So they took him in. And Spotty, what a wonderful dog he was. And there we are at a cottage. I'm sitting there, next to me is my brother-in-law, Dr. Randall's, at Lake Milligan, near Pound, Wisconsin. We had a lot of fun over there. Once more, something that happens in every kind of a life. There's the sun finally beginning to set. And there, of course, we arrive at that very moment when the sun is finally going to its rest. There's a lot more that I could say here at this time. Do you have time to listen to a sad, very sad story?
Yeah.
Just before we had my brother's church, there's a battle ensued between him and the associate. That congregation did not belong to any synod, but the members came from the Wisconsin and Missouri synod. They lived in peace and harmony. My brother had vicars, he had assistants, and finally they called it an associate. I called it cowboy. The first sermon that he preached in that congregation was this: this congregation will not remain without synod affiliation. It will by force become a Wisconsin Synod church. And the second was, your pastor has allowed Boy Scouts in this congregation. I will not allow it. And parents who come to church and have not taken their boy out of the scoutings, I will not give communion to them. It was really a sort of a battle royal. Then came the day of the 40th anniversary of my brother in his marriage and in the ministry in that congregation. John preached that morning. That the associate did not attend. On the following day, my brother came and had a letter in the post office. And there the associate accused my brother of preaching heresy, of preaching false doctrine, and that he had to be removed from the ministry. The brother said, we'll take the sermon and send it to the faculty in Thiensville, see what they say. They did that. The associate didn't stop in the meantime. The critique of the sermon came back, received an excellent. The faculty said there's no heresy there, or so forth and so on. What happened then, after all, was tragic. The council was mostly Wisconsin Synod members, but there were also Missouri Synod members on the council. But the new associate simply said, John, you better resign, because we'll make you resign. My brother said, you won't have to do anything, I resign, I quit. The following Sunday, it was called a meeting of the congregation to announce the very fact that my brother no longer was serving that congregation. My brother was surprised. Throughout that entire week before, not one of the members of the congregation came and said a word to him. Came the day of the meeting, and the minutes of the council were read that my brother had resigned, that he had been accused of false doctrine, but the seminary had said it was not false doctrine, but they felt he had to be removed. One of the members of the congregation said, may I have a word? He said yes. They came to the front of the congregation and handed a letter to the man who was in charge of the meeting. And he said, now you can give these members a release, or they are leaving. And the chairman of the congregation said, oh, well, that's all talk. He opened the list of people who were leaving. 262 families simply declared, we are leaving St. Paul's. We are forming our own congregation because we can't agree with any of these things that are being done here. They laughed at them and said, you'll come back crawling. The following week they found a place to worship. My brother went with them, but he did not preach anymore. He said, I've had enough. Within the month, they had purchased 14 acres in Arlington, Minnesota. Within another month, they had an architect and began their building plans, built a beautiful church, and that was the end of it, so to say. It's an unfortunate thing that congregation lost half of its members. In other words, not having 900 people or anything like that, it suddenly went down to 300. They had a very difficult time of continuing. The pastor who had caused all of this trouble finally was asked to leave, And in leaving, they discovered that $86,000 of the money that had been saved already for the windows, that had already been used in order to support the pastor. He was simply asked to leave, and he didn't want to, so they said, "You're done," and he left. My brother continued. I mean, he didn't attend church there, but he went to the new one. But his strength was failing. He had had a number of heart attacks. And finally also, the day came when he was just about ready to die. Something strange happened. The former principal of the school, who had been an opponent of my brother, came to the hospital and on his knees asked for forgiveness because he was wrong. The story was this. His wife told him, "Unless you go and do that, don't come back into this house. I own this house." So she laid down the law. And another teacher's wife told the teacher, "You go and apologize because what you testified to was a lie." And the man said no, and she said, "Get out of this house," and she divorced him. So it was a terrible battle. One of those things that shouldn't happen in a church, but it did happen. But the new congregation prospered, and this one also sort of recovered, nothing to what it was, but it did. And so also came the day when my brother died. It was on a Thursday evening, and the funeral was scheduled for the following Monday. I conducted the services on that Sunday, and then we drove to Arlington. But on Friday morning, Saturday morning, I called Arlington, the florist. And I said, "I'd like to order some flowers for a funeral." And they said, "Well, who are you?" I said, "I'm Pastor Bradtke." There was a shriek. In the background, I could hear people were saying, "He's alive! He's alive, he's on the phone! He didn't die!" So, what did I do? I finally introduced myself as being his brother. So, of course, they were very happy. On the Sunday evening after we left the funeral home, David had flown into Minneapolis from San Antonio. Susan flew in from Milwaukee. They took a car and drove out to Arlington. And they hadn't had anything to eat. And they said, "Come on, let's go out and eat." Well, they couldn't find anything to eat, not in Arlington. They said, "I'd like to have some beer." And so I said, "I'll go to the tavern." The tavern was located right below, Minnesota was very strict at that time, right below the city hall. And I walked in. Oh, there were a lot of people gathered there. And they saw me walk in. There was a striking resemblance between my brother and myself. All of a sudden, that jukebox was blaring, and they took a look at me. There was absolute silence. I walked up to the bar, and there was the bartender. He looked at me, and I said, "I'd like to have a 6-pack. "No," I said, "a 12-pack. The kids are thirsty." So he looked at me, and he said, "I thought you were dead." I didn't know. I'm Pastor John's brother. So when they finally heard back, the people, boy, they began to laugh. Were we scared? So these are not pictures of the old church, but these are pictures of some of the things that happened years ago. So I hope I did not bore you, but we wish you good luck and everything good.
Excellent.